Hello, I'm Christina Davis, Director of the Program on U.S.-Japan Relations. Welcome to our seminar tonight on the Global Commons Stewardship, Enacting Systemic Transformations. I really appreciate your joining us. For those in the United States, we're competing with Olympic coverage, and so you're truly dedicated and coming to hear about one of the most important problems facing the world. And we are very glad to have with us one of the leading experts. I am honored to introduce Dr. Naoko Ishii, who is the Executive Vice President and Professor at the Institute for Future Initiative at the University of Tokyo. She's also the inaugural director of the University of Tokyo's Center for Global Commons, whose mission is to catalyze systems of change so that humans can achieve sustainable development within planetary boundaries. We take some small credit for her great success because Ishii Sensei was a program associate with the US-Japan program in 1984 to 1985. Before taking her current position, she was the CEO and chairperson of the Global Environmental Facility at the World Bank Group, and she also has spent 3 decades as a public servant working for the Ministry of Finance of Japan, reaching the high position as the Deputy Vice Minister of Finance from 2010 to 2012. She has authored many studies, including the book Seisaku Kyocho no Keizai Gaku from the Economics of Policy Coordination that was the winner of the Suntory Prize in 1990. She has also written several studies on long-term economic development, including Chokei Keizai Hatten no Jissho Bunseiki, which won the Okita Memorial Prize for International Development Research in 2004. We're very pleased to bring this seminar to you tonight, which is part of our special series of policy innovations in crises, supported by a grant from the Japan Foundation Center for Global Partnership. This event is also co-sponsored by the Harvard University Center for the Environment. Before we start our seminar today, I'd like to also announce that next week we will be gathering to discuss evacuation from Afghanistan, looking at the policies of the Japanese government towards the evacuation, featuring the research of Yusaku Horiuchi, professor at Dartmouth University. And let me remind you of our Zoom etiquette to please keep your microphone muted. After we have the presentation, we will have time for question and answer, where you may raise your hand to ask directly, or you may write a question in the chat. Now, I'd like to turn over to Naoko Ishii. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, and hello to everyone, and good evening. I'm so happy to be back to the US-Japan program because I was associated from 84 to 85, and also from 1996 to 97. I was also the associate at the HIID, Harvard Institute for International Development, which is kind of absorbed by, I think, the Kennedy School. But so that in Harvard, my days and years at Harvard really opened up my eyes to the international economics and politics. So it's so good to be to come back. So thank you for the invitation. Today I want to talk about the system change, that where we are in terms of our humans' relationship with the Earth system, and why system change is required, and how difficult that task is, and how we want to get it. So let me start with my presentation, and I try to keep this presentation short, and shorting about 30 minutes, and then so that we can have enough time for the discussion. Are you able to see it? All right. Okay. Thank you. So that today's maybe key theme is this recognition that we were approaching the tipping points beyond which stability and resilience of the Earth system, which is critical for the humanity's human civilization, is lost and forever. And then the geologists informed us that we are actually leaving the Holocene and entering the Anthropocene. So it's a big event to humanity. So in order for us to stay within this planetary boundaries, well, actually the stable resilient Earth system, we need to fundamentally change our relationship with the Earth system, so that this requires a drastic economic system change, that particularly energy system, the food system, the city system, and the way we produce and consume. So this is the main theme of today. So let's go take actually a little bit longer view, so that we humans have been suffering and surviving the very drastic change of the temperature of the Earth. But then, and this captures that then how drastic it is. But you can see for the last 12,000 years that then that somehow that then the temperature stays and stabilized at this very mild the level. And the geologists called it the Holocene. And you can imagine, and with stabilized the temperature at a very mild level, the humanity were able to develop, actually start the agricultural, the civilization, civilization, and based on that, that we were able to do this, and that the people started to come to and live together in the cities, and then achieve the industrial revolution, and particularly for the last 70, 80 years, that the humanity have achieved a dramatic economic development. And this left-hand side of the pictures captures that our economic acceleration. We call it the great acceleration, but it also become very clear that it's not fully. It has incurred a lot of environmental footprint on the Earth, and these are captured by the right-hand side, these green pictures. And there are a group of scientists, the mostly that Earth environment, Earth system scientists, who came together and tried to measure how far we can go with this current way of actually the living, that the consumption, production, and the economic system. And they have identified the 9 important planetary system or subplanetary system, which does include climate and the water and the ocean and the chemical cycle. And they captured that where we are against the tipping points or the boundaries or carrying capacity. And the result is that the right-hand side of this the picture that we call it the planetary boundary, and well, they called it the planetary boundary. And if that the green shows that we are still okay against this planetary boundary or tipping points, but then if that we enter into the uncertain area, the color changed to yellow, and then the red shows that then we definitely went beyond the tipping points or point of no return. And it became very clear from this picture that in terms of the climate change, that we of course enter into the yellow area, that the same for land. But the interesting that the most actually severe deficit is about biodiversity and the chemical cycle. So, and but in a nutshell, this results show us that we have been actually transgressing that most of the planetary boundaries, which are foundation of our civilization. The same kind of group also show another study. This shows that the many of the important ecosystems are kind of connected. So the Greenland ice sheet is the melting, or Arctic summer sheet ice melting. Then that it has caused it unusual saturation of the water that on the sea, and it actually going to the Amazon rainforest. It caused that dieback of the Amazon rainforest. So the many of the important ecosystem are kind of connected, so that the ones that a few important systems are kind of exceed the tipping points, it caused this cascading turnover of the ecosystem. So that is why it's so important to really work hard for next 10 years to stop this potential tipping cascade. And this picture figure also shows that we actually have left the Holocene and enter the Anthropocene. And but if we really don't do anything, that we will be going down to the hothouse Earth pathway. So our task is that how we can stay as close to the Holocene type of the Earth system or stabilized Earth system rather than the free flow to the Anthropocene. So the Anthropocene, it means that then it's the geological era of the human, but it's not really used for the good way. It's basically means that we human, the only one species, have already altered the function of the Earth system. So it's very alarming, that word. It's not just the scientist or the geologist but actually that the eminent and business leaders have also warned us that the environmental issue became a big the risk factor. That every year around the Davos time, there is the global risk report announced, and this shows that the big risk from the business point of view, and the green shows the environment, so that the year by year that the box of the green become dominant, and the 2020 shows that all top 5 risks by business the viewpoint dominated by environmental risk. This changed a little bit in 21 because of the pandemic, but then and this is the latest global risk report, and showing that in the near term, yes, that the infection, that the pandemic and the social division become important. But if you take they take the view of 5 to 10 years, again, environmental risk came back as the most significant risk. So that why we need a system change, because as we have just seen, that we humans have changed that actually altered the Earth system, and our relationship with the Earth has changed completely, and we were basically in collision course of the Earth system, so that it's now our turn to change our system so that we continue to stay within the planetary boundaries and to rebuild our relationship with an Earth system. And that's why we think that the socioeconomic system change is absolutely important for our own survival, or our own civilization. And the scientists alerted us that we have only 10 years left to set this system change on course. Why 10 years? Because the scientists informed us that we need to achieve the decarbonization of the economy by mid-century 2050. And in order for us to achieve that goal of decarbonization by 2050, we need to really start the system change as soon as possible. And the next 10 years is really critical to set ourselves into that path. So it's not only the scientists or the business people who alerted us, and during the the last decade, there are actually the world come together to try to see what would be the best way to achieve the sustainability. 2015 has 2 very important achievement agreement. One is a climate goal, the Paris climate goal. In 2015, but another one is SDGs, the same 2015. The SDGs have 17 goals, but then we who actually work for the sustainability or the environment, actually they usually use this right-hand side figure. We call it a wedding cake, the 3-layer wedding cake, and to structure in these 3 layers, the bottom layer is actually the targets, the SDGs related to the environment. It's a climate change, biodiversity, the water and the ocean, which kind of correspond to these planetary boundaries, if you remember those 9 systems that who actually keep us safe in terms of our collision with the planetary system. But still 70 is too much, so that then for us, the economists or the business people actually take this system change pathway, and in order to really achieve that sustainable development within planetary boundaries in 2050, what kind of system change is required? And many institutions presented how to slice this social economic system. And this is the way the World in 2050 Consortium presented. So that the decarbonization of the energy system is definitely the key, because we need to actually to find a way to to decarbonize the energy, but also our economic activities. That's the right-hand side, the bottom bulb. But another important system to be transformed is a food system that's next to this energy system. Why is that? Because the 25 or 30% of the GHGs actually emitted through directly or indirectly produced and production of the food. And then they use the 70% of the water to grow crops. Then the food system production is the biggest and the factor for the biodiversity, because they have changed the land use. And then it also causes a lot of chemical pollution through fertilizer. So in many ways, our food system is not sustainable in terms of our relationship with the planetary system. But still, there are a lot of people suffering from malnutrition and hunger, and how the world or the actually Earth can feed the growing population from to 10 billion people. It's that we need to really find a way to transform the food system. Then the smart city is another important system to be transformed. We all know that more than 50% of the population live in cities, and the cities emit actually the concentrated. The economic activities are concentrated in cities, and 70–80% of GHGs are in cities. And then because the population is growing, is now in South Asia and Africa, how they build the cities become extremely important to the future of our relationship with us. Then the next bubble is consumption production, so that our current production consumption system is very linear, that we extract the resources from Earth, and produce and consume, and actually the waste. So that then only 9% of the resources we extracted from the Earth actually going back to the production system, and the remaining the 90% is either actually the burnt or landfill, or actually stemmed and actually going to the water and the ocean. So that how we can really change our way of consumption and production, that's another important thing. Then of course ongoing digital revolution, that how they can accelerate this transformation or derail the transformation. Then at the end of the day, it's all humans, that human capacity to how to transform our system. So I just want to mention the Global Commons Stewardship. That's the name of my center, actually the center, which was actually established in 2020. And in our terminology, Global Commons and means a stable and resilient Earth system, planetary system, which is the foundation of human prosperity. But in order to steward this global commons, we need a system transformation. and we were yet to create some mechanism to how to govern the global commons. So that is the theme of our center. Some of you may know about the word tragedy of the commons. This is basically, in a nutshell, that you can imagine the pasture that commonly owned by the village, or if you are Japanese, that you can imagine this commonly owned the forest, or maybe iriaiji in Japanese, and you can imagine how those villagers and the commoners, the community actually that are able to govern their locally pooled resources. In case of Japan, that you can see that the mura no yoriai, and then if you actually breach that the rule, that you will be penalized and through mura hachibu, so that the community and for actually that the years came to know how to protect or steward the local commons. But then when the activities that our economic system become much more kind of globalized, we somehow lost this touch to the community, and we don't have a mechanism to protect and restore steward the global commons. So that then, so if we use Elinor Ostrom's famous 8 principles, how to protect and how to actually nurture the local commons, are there anything we, the global community, can learn from her study? No, that's actually another topic that we can go through. But anyway, that if you take a look at the real world, it's very clear that so far the global community, that the system are yet to find the effective mechanisms to govern the global commons, so that then the 3 Rio treaties, environmental treaties, climate change treaty, biodiversity treaty, desertification treaty, they all fail if you only judge by results, that then because that we are continuously losing biodiversity, desertification is ongoing, and take a look at climate change, right? That then we are on the course of, the hothouse Earth. So that how, so it becomes clear this nation-based and intergovernmental-based treaty are not good enough to protect and steward the global commons. What would be that the ideal mechanism to govern the global commons? That is the actually the mission of the global commons to the center. We actually form some partnership with international institutions like SDSN, led by Jeffrey Sachs, PIC, led by Johan Rockström, the WRI, and then Systemic. These are our research partners, and we came up with a kind of framework that how to govern the global commons. And this is maybe the fundamental, actually, that the framework to governing the to govern commons. So that the 4 systems, it's a role, it's an energy system, sustainable city system, consumption, the production, then the food system. These are 4 systems to be transformed. Then we come up with the 4 action levers or enablers that how to enact or the trigger system change. So that the idea is that if those action levers are able to ignite the system change, then we may be able to actually safeguard the global commons, which are the 5, 6, that the planetary boundaries. So that is the idea. And we have already gone through those 4 systems to be transformed. But then this is maybe the very important slide. What are the action levers to ignite the system change? There must be some common levers, and we identified 4 action levers or enablers. And one is that to really set the vision and target, and then and of course to come up with an institutions to govern it. And we come to realize, particularly after Paris Agreement, the climate, to set the clear goal and owned by the global community has made a significant impact to change, steer the course. So that's one important outcome from Paris, but also that, as I mentioned, the international treaties, even the climate treaty itself is not really good enough to change the course. So that these days we have seen a lot of multi-stakeholder coalition. It's not just the government or the nation state, but joined by the business and the municipalities, the citizens, and the academia come together to create this coalition to ignite the system change. And of course, the second next green action lever is how to reset our economic system, because then we are trying to, to transform this economic system. So what are the levers in it, so that how to reset the financial system, the fiscal policy, and the trade policy, and the innovation system. But then one, of course, that maybe one powerful instrument is how to put a price on those the global commons, including carbon pricing. So that's another important action lever. Then that these days we came to know, next one, that the blue one, that how to promote the just transition, that the north-south divide was or division in the society is becoming that the obstacle to this smooth system transformation. Of course, it itself, that the social unity itself is a very important goal, but even from just the global commons and mission point of view, that how to ensure that just transition become very, very important. Then the last one is on how to utilize this data, the cyberspace, to accelerate system transformation. So let me very quickly go through some of the outcome of this research or joint research. This is the index, Global Common Stewardship Index, jointly developed by SDSN, Yale University, and the Global Common Center. And this is already in the public domain, so you can take a look at this report. But the one significant achievement of this index is that we develop not only the domestic production-based index, but the domestic consumption-based index, meaning the capturing the impacts through trade. And this has a significant impact on the results, because let's take a look at the Japan case, and actually the same for US, that if we only take a look at the domestic production, the impacts in Japan, that we are more or less okay in terms of causing the environmental footprint. But if we take into account or incorporating the impacts through trade, that then our score changed completely from more or less okay from the domestic side to very bad on the spillover impacts. Japan import 60% of the food, and then how those foods are produced via destroying the rainforest through the importation of the palm oil, and or the coffee, cocoa, cacao, also that the production of the staples, that then we actually incur a lot of the damage to the environment through mass production system, utilizing a lot of fertilizer. So through our importation of foods and goods, we incurred a lot of environmental footprint outside of Japan, but we are responsible for those the impacts. So that this capturing those spillover impacts is a very significant outcome of this research. And we are able to find that where those the impacts that the damage occurred, and then this the color, that the dark color showed that where those impacts come from, because it's an impact through trade, that then it's mostly within Asia, Southeast Asia, East Asia, and the United States, and depending on the commodity, also that then Australia and those countries. And it's this also another way to take a look at it. that the developed countries do have the same problem, that the domestically we were more or less okay because we clean up our own environment. But then if we take into account this and the trade impact, still over impact, that our hands get dirty. So that's the message. Then if we take a look at this, the production side, I just take the example of Indonesia, because Japan has a lot of trade relationship with Indonesia. They are domestically very responsible because they produce the palm oil, the coffee, and destroying the rainforest. But their own spillover impacts is very limited. It's okay. So it's basically that we ask those developing countries of the global south to incur a lot of environmental footprint, and we imported them, and we kind of enjoy the good life. So that is the message, and this requires that the North-South collaboration along the value chain, that how to really to address this system change. So I know that it's already 30 minutes past, so that I will speed up a little bit. Another important the outcome is our work with the WRI, World Resources Institute, and they have made a significant achievement in terms of capturing system change and monitoring them, how far we are we are making progress in terms of system change. But then the shocking results is that among the 40 indicators they monitor, none of them are really on track to reach the 2030 targets. And many of the indicators show that the progress is quite limited. It's not good enough in terms of speed or scale. So that the message is that we need to really accelerate the system transformation in the energy system, transport, and the building, or the food, and so on. Another result is with our work with the PIC, Potsdam Institute, and they are doing this the simulation, system simulation, that what is the impact of the energy system, the food system, and the industrial change, and the outcome, which is very interim, or that not finalized yet, is also that we need to accelerate the system transformation, the energy system transformation, the food system will do the major part to reach the target by 2050, but still that we need to accelerate our system transformation. So this is a result of their system transformation, system by system, but the key message is that we need to further actually promote the system transformation. So I think that that time is mostly up, and you can take a look at some of the slides later, or if there are questions that we can come back. So yeah, maybe I will just finalize my presentation by my own reflection of the COP26 and in Glasgow. It's officially, it's a mixed bag, officially speaking, that some of the outcome of the official negotiation kind of disappointing, or it's half-baked, or that Guterres is very kind of upset or frustrated with lack of progress. But then when I see that the results, particularly outside the official negotiation, and then to take a look at what's going on with the multi-stakeholder coalition, with the announcement and commitment by nation states, but also that the non-state actors, that the business citizens, the consumer, that the producer, there are quite a good outcome. It's outside official negotiation. Let me just pick up the three things here. One good outcome is that 1.5 degree Celsius, and by 2050 become the international target. So this 2 degree is gone. It's 1.5. This kind of, that we Japanese lose that an excuse not to do 1.5. That's one. that then there is also that then good recognition, strong recognition that we need to take an integrated approach, because it's not just the energy mix, that the source of the energy mix, it's really that our relationship with the planetary system. So we need to take much broader view about that how to ignite the system change. It's not just how to stop that the coal and to do renewable. No, it's really the system change, and it also that pay attention to that the natural capital like a forest and a food system. So that's another very good thing. And also that the discussion has been really shifting from how to come up with the pathway to achieve the 2050 the decarbonization, and the coalition of those and the willings is has a lot of focus, and then the focus on the so-called the scope 3. It's more like how to take a look at the entire value chain become very, very strong. And the standardization of international accounting standard system is a big step forward. So these are maybe very positive way of how we see that the outcome of the COP26. That we at the University of Tokyo, a Center for Global Commons, together with 13 companies, you can take a look at those members, have actually launched the energy transition initiative, because those big companies also would like to have a more like a science-based, outcome-based than a venue to discuss that the what would be the best way to achieve 2050 net zero goals. So that with those 13 companies, we created this platform, and we are actually working quite hard to craft the pathway to 26, and this was launched during the Glasgow time. So let me stop here. And I'm very happy to engage with you in the Q&A, but thank you so much for listening. Back to you, Christina.
Thank you so much. This has been a fascinating journey together. You've highlighted the crisis ahead, and just as we became worried, you showed that you've been doing the hard work of providing measurements and strategies for how to take steps to improve our environmental and sustainable development. And it's really, a lot of us have many questions. And so I want to ask one myself, and then I'll turn over to one of our associates and open up to the audience. Now, I find the report your center has produced is so important, because when you can help to measure how much each country is contributing, it makes it easier to negotiate and establish responsibility. And one of the contributions is your work to show the spillover, where countries' own actions contribute to their environmental challenges, but also through trade, there's also relations with other countries. I wonder if you could talk about what are the actions you think this will motivate. Are you setting a new agenda for the next COP summit for a way to negotiate commitments? How do you hope governments will use your measures?
Yeah, thank you so much, Christina. This is the most exciting outcome, and actually that present us and provide us with many opportunities to engage with government as well as business. When I show this result to particularly Asian business leaders, that we were able to instantly create this community to how to address this shared problem, because it's not really solved by a consuming country only, let's say Japan, US, but then it needs a partnership with a producing country, or let's say Indonesia, Malaysia, or maybe some African countries, and to take a look at this entire value chain, because there's that practice needs to be changed along the value chain. So that if we were the first, we need to show these results and to basically wake up people. Then our diet, our food system, or tonight menu cause what kind of impacts on where, so that once we are able to see this and the results and with actually the scientific information, that then we can appeal to this and the actors along the value chain, the what needs to be done, what are the issues that we commonly share. Then that let's take a look at, let's say, the palm oil in Indonesia, which is that we were quite responsible for this loss of the biodiversity and then others through this deforestation in Indonesia, Malaysia, and others. Then how to then basically to change this practice. The one way is that they have been already working a lot of the round table, the production, responsible production, that then producers around the table and then certify that then the products. But then we need to really find a more systemic approach to address that. The one way is to really to how to price that the nature, that let's say the forest or the water and the land, so that that kind of price to be shared by through the entire value chain. And the one or two, actually, the Glasgow also produced a very good the platform, like let's not deforest, which is important, but we need to go a little deeper and how to recognize those natural capital which we were destroying, and how to price it, and how to incorporate those newly measured natural capital into our production, the consumption system. Okay. And that's why I was actually quite excited about this standardization of the sustainability standard, International Sustainability Standard Board, that because that kind of activity should be able to give us a common measurement of that, not only carbon, but also the nature. That will link up with that on the production side, through to rate and the consumption side. Right now, what's going on is a very piecemeal approach on the production side, the consumption side, and that will not put us on this systemic change pathway. So.
Okay. Great, thank you. I understand. That's an excellent explanation. I'd like to turn now to our associate Nobuhiro Mitsuoka, who is an associate with the program this year, studying at Harvard, doing research on development of a US microgrid system and the potential application to Japan. He also works for Nippon Telegraph and Telephone, the company, before coming to us this year.
Thank you, Christina. Ishii Sensei, thank you very much. I am so impressed with your excellent talk and how you're saving the earth that is our home. So as Christina said, I really appreciate all your great work. My question is slightly related to your current answer. But if there is advice, could you tell us what action we can take from tomorrow, yesterday, tomorrow? Yeah. So, for example, today, audience is we have professors and government officials and business persons like me. So, as I explained in your action level slide, yeah, could you be more specific about what each of the industry, government, and academia, and of course, we citizens can do to make a difference?
Yeah, and each one of us actually in your maybe professional the capacity, I think that also already engaging with some of those activities. If you are from business and entity, that then your company has been doing quite a good work, that then how to actually to actually chart some of the pathways that of the system change, and particularly your company is very strong on the information that then to how to capture those environmental footprint and pass it to the users. So I'm actually quite impressed with an entity and the work. And I am encouraging them to participate in this energy transition initiative. But anyway, each of the company is now actually that they're not trying to identify their role towards and the decarbonization by 2050. Again, when I mentioned decarbonization, it's not just on how to change the energy mix, it's more like on how to completely change their way of operating as a system. But then if your question is more like an individual in a capacity, and then my response is to really demand that change to the government and the business, and as a actually that then voter, that then you are able to actually spark some of the policy political discussion and in when you vote, and that this green movement in Europe is clearly showing this power of voters. The problem in Japan is that there aren't many politicians who can carry on this environmental policies. So your option is unfortunately quite limited, but you can still ask that what is your environmental policy that when you exercise your voting. But then as a consumer or the investors, that then you can demand some kind of change or the information. At least I'm quite frustrated when I go to the Japanese supermarket. The information, the environmental footprint is very much limited. That then you can take a lot of information, the nutrition when you take some of the package. But then none of them really show that how much rainforest that product destroyed or how much water it used. So this environmental footprint is the information about the environmental footprint is quite limited, so that as a consumer that we can start demanding those information to at least the supermarket, and if we become really strong, that they have to bring that kind of demand through the trade chain, that from retail to wholesale to trading company, and they should have some impact on that the production side. So that I mentioned the scope 3 or the value chain approach is now becoming a standard. That so this means that we as a consumer or investor should have a significant power to drive the value chain by asking or demanding those information. So that would be maybe my another extreme answer, being a business person, but also being a consumer and investor.
Wow,
well, I don't think your answers are extreme, and you've inspired interest. Emi Shitara asks, how can one get more involved in these types of actions? And it sounds like she's already been very involved in enviroactivism, attended the UN Rio Summit and working through the HBS online community. And I wonder if you could share with those of us watching suggestions of how to get involved.
Actually, at the University of Tokyo, we have started to actually this net zero campaign. So that each one of us is now the guardian of the Earth system, and then each one of us is becoming responsible how to do this activity through the university, so that it really changed our mindset as being an associate of the university. I started to see this, and this completely changed the mindset from bystanders towards more like an actor that actively involved in those campaigns. So this is quite interesting that change. So I assume that Harvard has already done it or started to do it, but just to be a part of this net zero campaign as a university, already started to see that the students that are becoming much more active guardian of the system. So that's another way I see that an action being actually taken.
Professor Susan Farr, longtime director of the program. Please go ahead.
Hi, Susan.
Well,
How are you?
Hello. Wonderful to see you, and thank you so much
Okay,
for all
thank
you've contributed and your wonderful talk tonight. People in universities, of course, are deeply concerned about these issues, and the whole issue of a person's individual global or their footprint is a very important topic. And increasingly, we hear people say that given the enormous energy expenditure involved in international travel, that we should reduce international travel. We should stay at home. We should have more electronic communications. You yourself, of course, have benefited enormously from international travel. And many people would say that digital communication has major limits for actually people-to-people communication. Where do you come down on this issue?
No, actually, it's so interesting because we are now talking through screen, right? The last time I visited your center, I was in person in 2014 and were able to associate and to participate in the discussion in person. And then until COVID-19 really hit us, we all believe that then, that then this physical the gathering is the way to really spur that the innovation in ideas. I'm not talking about the technological innovation, it's more like an innovation in ideas. And but now we come to know that still, actually, it's quite possible to engage and conduct what we wanted to do anyway, through those international conversations, through webinar, and the online, and then what the digital can actually help us doing, so that there is definitely the way to continue to do this international engagement. And there is, of course, the difference that many of us came together at Glasgow, and we kind of also that realize that we sometimes need this human touch, because then it's kind of really spur the energy, so that but then we don't have to do this crazy travel of the internationally. So there should be a very good balance of that. What we can do through those the cyberspace, actually the digital space, and what really we need to do and together in person. So we were still experimental, but many of us who really love to travel realized that we didn't have to do it, and there should be a nice way of balancing. But another important implication from this new the way of doing business is that you may remember that the audience may remember one of the topic today is how to create this and the way the community take care of the commons. And that one outcome from Elinor Ostrom's the work is that how to create a sense of the belongings to the community. And we also thought that it's only possible by physical communication, but through this digital, we also came to know it's possible to create a sense of belonging through those internet or through those digital technology. And even if we were so far away physically, so this experience of the COVID-19 and shifting most of our work into the digital space give us another insight that maybe we don't necessarily need to be physically together to create a sense of community to safeguard those commons, not only local commons, but the global commons. But in this case, it's extremely important that we should have a shared goal. We should have the social contract to how to govern the commons, and we should have even the penalty that if we don't really do it right. And so, but then by doing those kind of trust-based, the social contract with enforceability and accountability, there should be actually the way to govern those global commons, even we are not physically together. So that's the new insight from COVID-19, the new way of doing business. Back to you.
And yet, even if we are not physically together, we can have the conversations.
Yeah.
And There are a couple of additional comments in the chat that I just wanted to share with everyone. One from Elson Bankoff asking about the youth movement and what more can the youth movement do to increase awareness? Is striking the right approach to raising public consciousness? And on a related point, Marcus Schultz is also really interested in thinking about different ways to increase awareness and likes your approach to creating indices and knowledge, but also wonders if you see other ways to mobilize power. Finally, a very specific question of what can we do is the example of Japan's Biodiversity Fund. And Catherine Ibata Arens asks whether you think the policy initiatives such as Japan's Biodiversity Fund would set a model and maybe other countries would follow. So 3 different questions about what can we do. We only have a few minutes left,
Okay.
so if you want to share a few of your thoughts.
No, thank you so much. This has been really an issue I have been really struggling for decade since I took that Jeff position, because it's so difficult to really ignite the social movements. And particularly in Japan, I was quite envious of what's going on in Europe, and then even in the United States. It was almost, I wouldn't say impossible, but then the energy level among Japanese youth is so limited, and that is the fact. And many of the survey shows that we, the Japanese, are almost bottom in terms of energy level, but engagement or the commitment as a society, and including actually youth. So it's not a generation gap, it's more like a societal the gap between Japan and outside Japan, and then the Europe, US, Japan. I think that each of the community has a very different level of energy and the commitment, so that there will not be only one generalized answer. But when I realized that how behind the Japanese community, including youth and then adult, in terms of engagement, we need a very tailored approach to Japan, but also to each of the community. And the one way we actually discussed with the president of the UTokyo is it's basically it's exposure, that the fact that the university students and the staff are doing that outside Japan, and the fact kind of achievement they have already made, and by exposing them to their peers, there should be actually that some inspiration or the encouragement or the nudge that what they can do. And then we have started to do some international engagement among students. And then our expectation is those through international exposure to peers, that the Japanese youth and the UTokyo students should be able to get some of the courage and the energy. So that's one. But another way is, of course, as we discussed, to demand that change by not just going to the marching on the street, but then going to the supermarket and asking that then what is the environmental footprint. And if we are able to create those kind of social movement in a very not through agitation, but through more like a scientific information base. And then if we were able to compile those, I hope that then we can create some kind of movement. So my answer to the question is that we need a tailored approach to each of the community, each of the country, because what's happening going on in Europe is not really that effective or relevant in the Japanese society. So that then we need actually that help with the collaboration with maybe social the professional in the sociology, that how we can create that kind of movement. I lost the last question. Oh, the Japanese Biodiversity Fund. I have to say that Japan is not really well recognized, a very active participant in those movement, and then we need to again create more exposure. And I have to also confess that I even don't know what the Japanese Biodiversity Fund is. Been working for this issue for 10 years. This means that an awareness and even among the community is not good enough. So that I wanna actually have a side conversation after this. That then what is it and what is the way to address that issue? Yeah. Back to you, Christina.
One last question is, do you see a role for trying to restrain demand for the harmful products through any kind of penalties? This question from Maung is specifically thinking about the destruction of the Amazon and how demand for soybeans or beef may be contributing.
No, actually, absolutely, and that this really related to the discussion that how to enact to incorporate this and as environmental footprint into the economic discussion, and then if the China only imports the certified soybean from Brazil, that will significantly change the international market. So you can call it either the incentive or the penalty in the way you say it. But then those key actors who are now not really aligned their activities with the international standard have a significant role to play. And if the international trade system incorporate that kind of behavioral change into the system, that is significant. But even that then as making that information revealed to the public, and then to encourage that the consumers or the buyers to change that their activities must have some kind of the impact, and we are trying to create this international recognition, what is accepted, what is not accepted, either through incentive or the penalty, depending on which is more effective to the commodity of the market that we were talking about. But one significant maybe understanding is that we are good at providing incentive. We were not good at providing penalties. And so while we were encouraging that to create this 20% of the leader in the market, unless we find a way to penalize 80% of non-doers, that the significant system change may not take place.
Well, I think your report will help to raise awareness, and it provides tools to try and even through positive market incentives, allow pricing that would reflect the environmental impact and allow consumers to make choices. So it's really an important contribution you're making. Your presentation today has also inspired interest for all of us to try and do more, including the youth. Thank you so much for all of the work you're doing at the University of Tokyo and speaking internationally and through the reports and leadership of your activities. We're really grateful to have had the opportunity to talk with you today. And I thank you for joining us. I thank our audience for joining us and the program of US-Japan Relations and our co-sponsors.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that you are giving me this opportunity to coming back to US Japan. Thank you, Christina.
We hope to also see you in person again.
Absolutely. We need sometimes the human touch.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.